short question, but I guess it's a long answer. How do you calculate the optimal fleet size?
You don't really calculate the optimal fleet size because to a certain extent you want to grow as big, as much as you can. And that's for a very, very simple reason. And, you know, our business is not that complicated. It's for economies of scale. So the more ships you have under one roof, the more you can spread your expenses over those ships. And if those ships are very similar to one another, then obviously you will have economies of scale in buying parts that you need, in your purchasing power of fuel will be greater, so you will get more discounts in the market, etc. So I would say the limit of the size is more set by the regulators because they don't want anyone to dominate the market and to set the price than by ourselves. Fortunately, and even though we are one of the largest, we have still a lot of way to go before we would hit those restrictions set by the regulators.
Because you had a quote that when you're looking at growing the company, you look at it as, you know, not in absolute terms, but in relative terms. Maybe that's a good framework to use talking about growth. And you also have this great analogy to the airline industry, buying a new plane versus recycling or using an old plane. Can you just quickly go through that mental model?
Yeah, I think that the relative size is a reference to the client that you can service, because there's a lot of oil that is being moved on captive fleet. So in the past, the oil majors, they are their own fleet, and then whatever excess cargo they wanted to transport, they were asking the independent owners like us. Today, it's more the Saudis who are producing a lot of oil. They have their captive fleet, and then the Chinese have also a fairly large fleet. And so we, the independent, are trying to service and cater for the other guys. So that's what I mean by relative to absolute. So in a market of 820 or 830 VLCCs that exist, we only have 5%. But if you reduce that to the number of cargoes that we can really carry, because we are not captive to anyone, then we are closer to maybe 12%. And by the way, that can vary year on year, because from time to time, some of those players will increase their fleet, and from time to time, they will decrease their fleet. So it's something that we need to look at. I think that this is what I meant by relative versus absolute. Now, in terms of the relative size, is also a question of what you can manage at a particular point in time. So if tomorrow I want to double the capacity of Euronav, then I will have to change the business model, because I cannot hire enough people immediately to cater for that, despite the fact that the vessels are going to be delivered, are going to be ours almost immediately. And there you fall into your second question, which is, do we prefer to buy existing vessels, so the second-hand market in a way, or do you prefer to order? But the problem with ordering is that you are adding to the supply, and so you are in a way shooting yourself in the foot, because, as I said, I mean, the market is a balance between supply and demand, and so if you put more supply, then obviously the rest of the existing ship will go down. But if I really want to the other, then if you order, it's very easy to foresee, because it takes 2 years to build, foreseeing the necessary people that are going to be on board the vessel. If you buy second-hand in the market, then the vessels are being delivered to you immediately. And there you need to go for outsourcing some of the services that you need, which is not always optimal. I mean, it's a very good thing that it exists in our industry, but it's not always optimal, because we believe that the biggest or the greatest assets that we have in the company are the people. And so if you start outsourcing, you're a little bit out of touch with some of those people. And it's a very different way of working with people on board that are not employees of Euronav, which means that the values that they share, the way they work, may be a little bit different. And because they are more at a distance from the business, it's not for sure that our interest will always be aligned. So we prefer to buy second hands, but we are limited by the business model that we apply. And then, of course, going into or looking at the future, the type of ships that we want to operate in the future are not type of ships that we have today, because we will change the fuel that we use, and we will gradually try to have fuels that are zero emissions, which means that the engine will have to be modified. And if it's not possible to modify it, because very often it's not possible, you will have to build something new that has been designed to work with that particular type of fuel.
I want to come back to that because I know you were in Glasgow recently, but just a quick question in the shipping on the shipping side first. I think it's a normal quote that optionality is the best way to make money in shipping. Can you clarify by what you mean by optionality, and how do you increase or get the most amount of optionality available?
If we go back to what I said earlier, and I said that this is a market that is very volatile, but also unpredictable. And let us assume for a moment, because it will make the explanation simpler, that we have absolutely no clue when there is going to be a good freight environment and when there is not going to be a good freight. And freight are the rates that we receive for the service that we provide. Then optionality is the best answer, because if you have an option to get more ships or to prolong certain contracts, and it's your option, then obviously you're going to do that only when the rate environment dictates you to do that. So if you don't have optionality, then you are completely exposed to the market, and you're a little bit, I would say, a passive actor of the environment. If you have optionality and you can suddenly increase your exposure to certain markets or increase the size of the fleet because you have maybe rented some ships on short term, but you have an option to purchase them, it's going to be an advantage. Knowing that the value of the ships vary very much with the rate environment, it's also very interesting. So if I give you an example, when you order 2 ships, you can probably have an option to order a third one. And you have probably 1 year to exercise that option. In 1 year, many things can change. And so if the value of your contract has gone up, you continue to pay the same price to the yard, but maybe the value of the ship that you're building has gone up by 10 or 15%. And at that point in time, it's very interesting to exercise your option. If conversely, it went down, because maybe too many ships are being built, or yards are offering more opportunities to build ships, then of course you don't exercise the option, but you can still sign a contract, but at a lower rate. So option is very, very important in our market.